There's a pattern buried inside the Star Wars saga that almost nobody talks about out loud. Every single Jedi who has ever stepped on screen, Qui-Gon Jinn, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, even Luke Skywalker himself, eventually loses. Not just a single lightsaber duel, they lose the entire war, generation after generation, almost like clockwork. The official explanation fans usually repeat is simple: the dark side is just stronger. But if you actually trace how each of these defeats happens, that explanation falls apart fast. The Jedi aren't losing to a stronger enemy, they're losing to their own rulebook over and over, century after century. So today we're going scene by scene through exactly why that keeps happening. Emotional suppression baked into Jedi training, a Sith philosophy built to out-adapt them, a political system that corrupted the Order from the inside, a hero who rebuilt the same broken machine he once escaped, and one uncomfortable question waiting at the very end: what if balance never meant picking a side at all? Let's start with the crack running through the entire Order. The Jedi Code doesn't ask anyone to manage their emotions, it asks them to delete them. The Code's central warning is essentially this: unchecked fear curdles into anger, anger curdles into hate, and hate ends in suffering. It sounds like ancient wisdom. But modern psychology has known for decades that suppressed emotion doesn't actually disappear. It goes underground and waits for the worst possible moment to resurface. Look at Anakin Skywalker. He's taken from his mother as a young child, never allowed to properly grieve when she dies years later, never allowed to openly love Padme, never even allowed to admit he's terrified of losing the people closest to him. None of that fear vanishes. It just ferments in total silence for years until it detonates into the single greatest betrayal in galactic history. And it's not only Anakin. Obi-Wan loses his own master, Qui-Gon, in his very first major mission, and is immediately taught to process that loss through detachment instead of actual grief. Even Mace Windu, the most disciplined Jedi on the entire council, channels every ounce of his emotion into rigid control rather than ever processing it. And by the end of his long life, even the wisest Jedi Master in the saga quietly concedes the same uncomfortable truth: that this entire philosophy depends on training yourself out of ever fearing loss in the first place. That's not healing, that's avoidance, dressed up as enlightenment. A Jedi isn't taught how to sit with pain, a Jedi is taught how to bury it, and anything buried alive eventually claws its way back out. An order built on suppression doesn't prevent explosions. It guarantees them one generation at a time. Now compare that to the Sith, because their entire system is almost the exact mirror image of the Jedi's, and that's exactly why it keeps winning individual battles even while eventually losing the long war. The Sith don't suppress passion, they weaponize it. Their structure runs on one ruthless rule known across the galaxy as the rule of two, only ever a master and a single apprentice at a time. And the apprentice's entire purpose is to eventually grow powerful enough to overthrow their own teacher. That's brutal. It's also relentless evolutionary pressure built directly into the religion itself. You can see it play out almost mechanically. One Sith master trains his apprentice for years only to be struck down once that apprentice is finally strong enough to take his place, exactly as the rule demands. Every single generation of Sith is forced to adapt, improve, and outgrow the one before it or get replaced by it. Now compare that to the Jedi, who recite the same code, sit on the same council, and follow the same training rituals for 1,000 uninterrupted years without ever updating a single line. The Sith aren't winning because evil is inherently more powerful. They're winning because their system rewards constant adaptation, while the Jedi system actively punishes it. Ambition, hunger, even rage in Sith philosophy, none of that is a flaw to be deleted. It's raw fuel. And fuel, used without restraint, accelerates far faster than discipline that's too afraid to even strike the match. The catch, of course, is that fuel eventually burns out completely. And that detail matters a lot more later in this video than it seems right now. The Jedi's failure isn't only emotional, though. It's structural and it's deeply political. By the era of the prequels, the Jedi Order has quietly stopped functioning as a religious order at all. It's become the Republic's standing army, taking direct orders from senators, generals, and eventually from a chancellor who happens to be the single most dangerous Sith Lord in 1,000 years. One senior Jedi Master effectively admits this contradiction himself, pointing out that an order built around neutrality and peace has become the enforcement arm of one side in an enormous galactic civil war. They stopped being the people who kept the peace and quietly became the people who enforced somebody else's version of it instead. That's exactly why 10 of the most perceptive beings in the entire galaxy can sit across a war table from a hidden Sith Lord for over a decade and never see what he actually is. Not because he's hiding it that well, but because the Order has become too entangled in its own bureaucracy and politics to ever look up. And the public notices this shift too. By the end of the Clone Wars, ordinary citizens across the galaxy don't picture Jedi as wise, neutral monks anymore. They picture armed generals leading troopers into battle, increasingly distant from the very people they originally swore to protect. Once an institution loses the public's trust, it has already lost, long before a single lightsaber is ever drawn against it. Here's the part that really stings though, and it stretches across the entire saga's timeline. Centuries earlier, the wisest Jedi Master in the Order trains a brilliant, ambitious student and loses him completely to the dark side, the very first crack in this entire cycle. Decades later, that exact same Order trains Anakin Skywalker and loses him too in almost the identical way. Then Luke Skywalker becomes the one Jedi in the whole saga who actually breaks this cycle, even briefly. He refuses to kill his own father, chooses compassion over dogma, and ends an entire war by putting his weapon down instead of raising it. And then, years later, he grows up and rebuilds the exact same broken system anyway. Same isolation, same secrecy, same fear of attachment passed down as official doctrine to a brand new generation of students. Trained on a hidden island cut off from the galaxy, almost identical to the old Jedi temple he grew up despising. And when Luke senses real darkness rising in his own nephew, his instinct for one single terrible half second is to consider striking him down in his sleep. That exact moment of fear, the same fear the old Jedi code was supposedly designed to train out of every single Jedi, is the spark that actually creates a new fall to the dark side right inside his own family. Luke doesn't repeat Anakin's fall. He repeats the entire Order's fall for the third time in recorded galactic history. Same mistake, new generation, same devastating result. So maybe the real question was never which side is stronger. Maybe the actual problem is that the Force was never supposed to be a binary at all. The saga's oldest prophecy speaks of a chosen one destined to bring balance to the Force, and for decades, most fans simply assumed that meant the light side finally winning for good. But what if balance was never about one side permanently defeating the other? What if it actually means neither philosophy is allowed to fully dominate? That discipline and passion, detachment and attachment, fear and courage were always meant to coexist, instead of being split into two warring religions that each collapse every few generations. It's not a coincidence that fans have spent decades joking about so-called gray Jedi, figures who reject the binary completely and try to walk the line between both philosophies instead of choosing one. Because right now, both systems remain incomplete on their own. The Jedi suppress until they finally break. The Sith indulge until they inevitably self-destruct. It's almost the exact same conclusion modern psychology eventually arrived at completely independently, that the healthiest relationship with emotion isn't pure suppression or pure indulgence, it's integration. Feeling something fully, honestly, without being ruled by it. 3 generations of Jedi Masters tried the suppression route, and 3 generations watched it fail in almost the exact same way. Maybe balance was never about choosing a side at all. Maybe it was about finally becoming wise enough to refuse to choose one. And that's the real reason Jedi keep failing, generation after generation. Not because the dark side is inherently more powerful, but because the Order keeps mistaking suppression for peace, isolation for safety, and rigid dogma for actual wisdom. Every generation inherits the exact same code, and every generation pays the exact same price for it. Maybe the next chapter of this saga, whoever ends up carrying it forward, won't need to choose between light and dark at all. Maybe the real next step was never picking a side in the first place. Maybe it was finally growing wise enough to hold both at once. And maybe that's a lesson worth carrying far beyond a galaxy, far, far away.